Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Autopilot on podcast. Got John and Scott co-hosting today. We have a great guest today, Jose. Welcome to the show.
What's up, Jose?
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Happy to have you, man. We're bringing Jose in as a guest. John and Jose go back. So how do you guys know each other?
Do you want me to explain, Jose? Or you want to?
I mean, we used to work together. We used to flight
Yeah,
instruct together, the same place
back in the glory days.
back in the glory days. So yeah,
Don't you wish you can go back?
No, I don't. I do not wish. I thank God every day I do not have to go out in 105 degrees and go fly a Piper Archer and do that. It was a great
I
operation, all of that, but man, no, I don't. I don't want to go back. I don't even have my CFI anymore because I told myself I will never go back to do that. And that's not a diss against them. I just don't like the work. Anyways,
loved it. I thought it was great. I
yes.
did. I loved it. I still tell people it was like one of the best jobs I've ever had. I'm dead serious. I loved every. I mean, you have hard moments in flight instructing, but I really loved that job. It was fun. It was fun. It's the last time you're really going to have true coworkers you see every day, and
That is
that's
true.
something that I do miss in the 121 world. So
Okay, well, maybe I take it back. I'm not going to sound like such a dick now about everything. There was some great times there, but I guess what I didn't like about my experience was con I was so overworked, and I did that to myself. And so I think if I would have been more laid back and done everything, I think it would have been a lot smoother in that sense. Because I was
hmm
doing the video production stuff for, the company I was at as well. So I was working from, I don't know, 7 AM to midnight every day
Mm,
for, like, 6
that
days a week.
explains a lot.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
turned out to be a lot. But anyways, I think if I it was just such a burnout in that sense. So once I got through that point of view, but the actual and like I also like I told you, like I would schedule at like noon in July in Phoenix. So like I did those things to myself. So
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah.
he's right. There's
Yeah.
some great camaraderie
Yeah.
at the place and all of that. But and I actually, you know what? I keep up with everyone I instructed quite a bit. I know Jose, you probably do too, right? With everyone that we worked with.
yeah, at least I try to. Everyone kind of scattered, right? You get a job at the
Yeah.
airlines, and you all move across the country, and
Yeah.
you kind of lose touch with some people. But aviation is such a small industry that half
Yeah.
the time I'm walking through an airport and I see somebody I know,
You know
and you end
more
up
than two
catching up with
degrees
somebody.
separation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, great. Well, Jose, why don't you? We usually do this with every guest, so if you want to just take us through like a quick background, you know, um, you know, from like when you first started in aviation and kind of your progression to where you're at now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started flying back in 2007, out in Denver. I think John was probably in diapers, maybe pull-ups,
I
something like that.
A
was
couple boomers here. All right, I don't feel alone anymore.
11 I was 10
That's
years
right.
old. So,
That's
yeah, I was,
right.
like, in 3rd grade. So
Wow,
Yeah. So anyway,
I
I was in
graduated high school.
I was in high school to be fair. So
Oh seven. Oh, I was
yeah.
already out of high school. Holy cow, man.
Oh yeah, you are old.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I started flying in '07. Graduated high school, went to college, flew in college, got all the rest of my ratings aside from private pilot. After that, I actually stopped flying for about 6 years. I worked in aviation risk management during that time. Yeah, so I used to put together insurance programs for helicopter operators, corporate flight departments.
Cool.
Um, yeah,
You're the first one we've had that does that. Has done
yeah,
that.
135 operators, smaller airlines. It was an absolute blast, and I have no regrets about doing that. I still keep up with those guys at that company. So that was a lot of fun. Life happens, and it was just sort of time to move on from that job. It wasn't real. I loved it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do
hmm
every single day for the rest of my adult life, until
Sure.
retirement. I always wanted to fly, so I quit that job and left the pay behind to become a flight instructor out in Phoenix. Um, enjoyed that, did that. Kind of became a member of management at that flight school. Taught some at the college it was associated with as well. doing ground schools, and then went to the airlines, right? Kind of the traditional route. Flew the CRJ for a while, for a few years. Went to another airline that flew Airbuses for a bit of time, and then finally left there. Now I'm at what I consider to be my forever job. I fly the 737 for a different airline at this point. So, living the dream, isn't that what I'm supposed to say?
Living the
Nightmares are
dream.
dreams too, man.
That's right. That's right. So that's kind of a brief history of what I did.
Awesome.
You know, somebody who was in aviation, actively flying, to somebody stopped and then worked my way back into it, which was, let me tell you, when you forget how to get ATIS, that's you're rusty. Let me tell you,
You've been out for a little while.
it
Yeah.
was it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough, but it all worked out. So here I am. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
What?
what was it like transition from the Airbus to the 7.3? Because I think there's a lot of guys right now
Mhm.
doing that same thing, and
Quite
so
a
I'm
lot.
just I'm just curious on what your perspective was with Airbus to 7.3 and how that all worked. Is it as bad as they say, or is it really not that bad?
Yeah, honestly, the airplane does the same thing. Even like anti-ice, it's the same thing. Right, it's the exact same thing with the two airplanes. You're missing a tray table, a nice place to put your luggage, which I really do miss. I miss the tray table. It's a smaller cockpit, but it it's so similar. You get to a point where all jets are pretty much the same. I don't know what it's like to fly a 7.8 or a A350. Maybe that's a little bit different. But I thought the transition was pretty decent. In fact, I'm really glad I flew the Airbus before I jumped into the 7.3. It's kind of a weird hybrid between the CRJ and an Airbus almost.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fun. You're flipping switches. You feel like you're actually doing something. It flies great. I gotta say, it flies great.
I think that's
It was a
one.
little it was a little bit weird remembering how to trim again because in the Airbus you just don't.
Right.
And then the 7.3
Is
you
it
really.
thumb trim?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's like the
Assume,
Pilatus was.
yep, yep, thumb trim. So the first few hours in the sim were a bit rough because of that, but you get the hang of it. It all
Oh,
comes
there's
back.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
right.
there's no auto trim at all.
Not
Kinda. Not really.
not real. I
Okay.
would say not really. There's like this speed trim system which kind of helps you out on takeoff and that initial climb, and
But
for
then you
that's when you notice it
retrim.
the most. But you'll retrim after that as well.
Okay. Okay.
There are certain points where it does trim, but it's
There's augmented
no.
trimming. Okay.
No, we'll just say, well, I guess it's not even. I guess it's not even trim. I don't want to back myself into a corner, and you guys are going to get a bunch of emails, and people are going to say that I don't know what I'm
Well,
doing, and
actually,
blah blah blah.
Jose, it works
Yeah,
like this.
exactly. It's
God.
it's. I guess they're playing more pitches anyway. Maybe you can edit that out. I don't know.
Comment pirates.
They're going to be out there. Well, actually, so my description wasn't actually the best on that one. So anyway, forgive me, pilots of the USA. We'll
I'm
just
not
go with
gonna.
no. Can we
Yeah,
just go with no? You
There you
just need to
go.
trim yourself. Yeah.
sounds good.
There we go. Well, that's it. That's the answer.
I think
Very
one
nice.
I think one thing I kind of do miss about the ERJ that I flew, uh, is being able to see the thrust levers move and kind of have a little bit more control on those things. The Airbus does a really
Mm.
good job with doing auto thrust, but there's some times where you kind of feel like you're dragging it in, depending on the configuration, the center of gravity, and the weather in that sense. And you have to
Mm,
bump the speed in that sense to,
It's slow to respond on vinyl. That's what I've
yeah,
learned.
yeah, exactly.
That's where
So
I think it's at its weakest.
exactly, and then also, I just think that, when it comes to the auto trim, that is a really nice feature actually, or not auto trim, where you actually trim it yourself. I
Oh,
like that
and
mm,
manual
too.
trim?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people struggle with the Airbus, and I feel like so I've been flying a ton lately, as we all know, but, like, I think what's really clicked with me now is I have a really good understanding and feel of, like, a seat of the pants of, like, the last 100 feet in the airplane, and I think that's genuinely the most difficult thing to learn in Airbus because you have no kind of feel for the airplane really, and it's a lot of
mm,
visual things. Versus if you have a yoke, you can feel where the airplane is
Yeah, the
off the ground,
feedback. Yeah.
and you can
Mhm.
feel if it's dropping out under you a little bit more in that
Mhm.
sense, and add more power. So it's more of a pilot's airplane, as everyone knows. But there's pros and cons to each one, and I think that the new one going forward, I know Boeing said that mid 2030s is when the next clean sheet design is going to come, whether it be a 7.3 replacement or kind of a mixture between 7.3, 7.5 in that kind of marketplace for a narrow body airplane. So I'm excited to see kind of where Airbus and Boeing take their next generation airplanes because I think it's going to fix a lot of the issues that we have right now, at least.
Yeah, maybe. Let's hope so, right? Let's
Yeah,
hope
we're
that
still
overhead
ahead.
panel from the 7.3 disappears forever.
What happens if they keep that panel in the year 2035? I mean, could you
I mean,
imagine?
maybe it'll be the same type rating again. It'll make a couple of airlines happy out there, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody knows that Southwest is the reason that panel is exactly the same.
Because they didn't want to
Allegedly,
allegedly.
Allegedly.
allegedly, yeah.
That's
Although what,
funny.
isn't it, there are some other airlines who have the 7.3, a ton of them, right?
Yeah. United
Sure,
for sure.
sure.
Yeah, United,
Yeah,
yeah, they have a ton, so
yeah, yeah. Well, all the, I mean, Delta, Sun Countries, all 7-3 fleet, Allegiance going 7-3.
mm.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of carriers have them.
Yeah. So should
Mhm.
we
It's
get
just
into go
yeah.
ahead?
Oh, I was gonna say, it's just I mean, I love jump seating on them because it's very nostalgic when you're in there. It feels like you're flying an old airplane because you are. But it's like, you look at it and you're like, "Okay, the center console and overhead panel have been the exact same since the '60s, literally, and they just threw some screens over the round dials." That's literally all that feels like has changed in that cockpit, you know?
There's a couple of changes that have taken place, even between, like, the NG and the MAX. There are, some minor changes that have taken place, and really, there's one in particular that's just more of a nuisance, I think, than anything else.
Did they fly different, the NGs and the Maxes?
Um, yeah, I suppose so. Sometimes you don't know if it's just because 'cause you're flying a plane that's 25 years old in an NG sometimes, and, the controls get a little bit, it's maybe more spongy or something like that,
Yeah.
and all the Maxes are brand new. But no, they fly pretty similar, I would say. The Maxes have, you have to be a little bit more careful with descent planning. They do not slow down well, but you guys know that, when you guys jump into
Bus
a
is
3,
slippery, yeah,
you guys fly the bus, right? So the 321 especially, right? That doesn't slow down well.
especially the
So
newer ones, yeah.
the Neos, yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
That's why I was gonna ask the question because I know the 321 Neo versus, say, a 320 Classic or even a 320 Classic in that sense, like the
Mhm.
COs, really when it comes to how you land the airplane changes quite a bit in terms of thrust reduction in that sense, because the Pratt& and Whitneys actually they delay your thrust reduction by, like, maybe a second or 2 for the engine to spool down compared to the classics, which are almost an immediate thing. So I try
Mhm.
to go a little bit slower on my thrust reduction on the Neo, the 321 Neo, compared to the classics, just because, or I'm sorry, the classics I go a little bit slower on because if I cut it right when it says retard, then I could basically be cutting it at 20 feet, and you could come in a little bit more harsh versus the other way around. So that's why I was curious because I don't know if that was the same translation into the 7.3 or not.
So I don't think there's too much of a difference between
Yeah,
them. Nah, no, it's all pretty similar. You just the big difference is you got some big screens in the Max, which is pretty nice.
they are
At
pretty
least
nice.
if you don't look up, you're flying something from this century, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do
Yep.
you think that it's how difficult is it? Let's say you're going I just flew from O'Hare last night and they were doing de-ice
mhm.
prep and all of that where it was just very chaotic, I guess, and we went during rush hour basically. And I was doing a basically starting the engines back up and then we had all these different things and it was basically a lot of things happening in a short amount of time. And I was just, when I've jump seated on different airlines for the 7.3, I see, the FO go over there and start clicking all the buttons and doing the pressurization, all that kind of crap on the overhead panel. And I was just wondering, was that difficult to learn all those different kind of flows in that sense coming from the Airbus, which is like, okay, lights out, everything is
Intuitive.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, in the Airbus, you sit there, you're like, oh, it's a hot start. Oh, it's
ECAM
restarting.
actions.
A cutoff switch? Or yeah, or a condition
Yeah,
lever. What's
right.
a condition lever?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's more work because you have to do more button pushing,
Manual.
switch flipping.
Yeah.
The plane's not going to do something unless you tell it to do it. But because I flew the CRJ, the 200, especially, that translated really well, I think, into flying the 737. Yeah, I mean, everything from, probes to pressurization. I mean, you got to do all of that, right?
Well, pretty quickly if you mess that up. Like, let's say you were
Yeah,
doing something on a pack overhead or something like that, and it didn't
yeah. I mean, a lot of
pressurize.
times you end up getting real hot, or why is it so cold in here? Or usually it's why is it so hot in here? And you're
Mhm.
like, oh, it's because
Sure.
I forgot to turn on one of the packs or something. So, but as long as you do it the same every time, you set it up the same way, it becomes second nature. I don't want to say you don't think about it, because that says that you're, no pun intended, on autopilot, but
It is
um,
second nature, though. Yeah.
it becomes second nature. You look at the panel, you're like, oh, it's not configured correctly. Or, for me, I do it the same way every time, and you get into a rhythm, and, the mistakes are pretty minimal, to be
Yeah.
honest. And it's not complicated, right? It's really not. If you're coming from the Airbus and you look at somebody like an FO flipping the bleed panel switches, yeah, it looks like a lot, but in reality, you're just like, oh, I'm shutting this off, turning it back on, whatever. And you have different configurations, obviously, for different situations, right? Single engine taxi, or whatever, max cooling, using just the APU, or um, a bleeds off, take off, if you need performance or something. So Um, yeah, it becomes second nature. But that's like everything else in aviation, right? You're like, I don't know, Scott, you used to fly King Airs, right? Were they
Yep,
round dial King
both.
Airs?
I've flown
Yeah,
both, yeah.
right. Like, if I were to stare at somebody flying a King Air that's round dials, I would sit there and go, oh, yeah, I can't do that. But if I did it for like a month, I'd get real comfortable. So it's the same
Yeah,
thing with flying.
exactly.
It's the same thing,
You
right? We're
just
all
develop
pilots.
your
It's
routine.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
And
f
then
yeah.
you get good at it, or at least adequate.
Yeah, well, you get very efficient,
Yeah.
in your
That's
flow,
right.
yeah. Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I missed a lot of the automatic switching, right? The power priority that the Airbus has. That stuff is really nice. Mm, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's a trade-off,
For
you
sure.
know? Yeah,
Should we move
so
on to our next segment of kind of going through the premiumization of airlines? What do you guys say?
yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Well, I'll kind of tee it up for us then. So, before we were talking and kind of figuring out what we want to talk about, Jose made a great point of kind of how all the airlines' business models are changing outside of the legacies. And we thought it would be interesting to kind of dissect kind of the history around that and kind of where we see the airlines moving forward. And I know I have a lot of opinions. And Jose, I'm kind of curious on where do you want to start with this and going forward? What do you see happening?
Yeah, I mean, in no way am I some sort of, I'm not what do they call Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha? I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not the oracle here, that knows what's going to happen. But, one thing is for sure is that airlines have to respond to market conditions as
Mhm.
they currently are, and as they try to project out into the future. If you go back looking to the Great Recession starting in what, about '06, '07, right?
Yes.
When the airlines, that's when we had the biggest last wave of consolidation, right? From six major carriers ish to three major network carriers.
Yes.
And then we saw a bunch of airlines also disappear, gone, right? The airlines that disappeared, a lot of them were trying to move into, like, they were trying to respond to market forces, right? And that was what? Great Recession, traveling public didn't have as much disposable income. And so that's when the rise of the ULCC LCC market started, I would really say, right? That's when it really took
Yeah,
off, when
that's
cost
fair.
cutting, get your CASM as low as possible. And, you even saw premium airlines, right? Like Midwest Express or Midwest Airlines up in Milwaukee, that used to be, for the most part, all first class seating in their 717s. I think their MD-80s were coach, but they flew them just to leisure destinations.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm like, my recollection, right? They ended up going 50-50 in their 717s first coach, right? And then, they ended up trying to move to, they ended up merging with Frontier, right? And they couldn't make it work because at the time, the traveling public wasn't willing to pay a premium for premium, you know?
Which has changed.
Yeah. Isn't that
It's
wild?
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
like, but again, what is it now? Now it's people with, the rise of the upper middle class and upper class in the US is leading to a lot of premium
Boomers, man.
travelers, right? Yeah,
Serious.
I mean it's boomers, but
Well,
it's
I mean,
also
not in a
just
negative way.
high
Yeah.
income earners, right? High income earners and boomers. And then as the boomers die, the wealth transfers to their kids as well, right? So there are a lot of people in the country that do have a lot of money.
Yes.
And I think that's United and Delta seem to be taking, the lion's share of those passengers.
Right.
A, because of the product, and they can offer that premium experience. Now, whether or not standing in line for 2 hours to get into the Delta Club in Atlanta or Phoenix or whatever is that a premium experience? I don't know. That's up to the person who has the $1,000 a year card, right?
I had access when I was in the corporate world, and um Atlanta, it wasn't worth it, to be blunt. At other airports, it was, Salt Lake, where I was commuting out of at the time, it was worth it, but Atlanta, those lounges, to be blunt, suck, man. They're
I have
Yeah.
old, they're
the
dated, they need to be updated. They really do. They're old,
I have the
but
Venture
they
X
always have
card,
lines.
and the
Yeah.
Venture X card is legit. The
The
lounges
Capital One
in
lounges are nice.
yeah, and
Wow.
DIA or whatever, and New
Mhm.
York and Dallas, all of them.
The Vegas one, it's
Yeah.
really yeah.
So anyways, they're very high end in that sense.
Yeah.
It's not a credit card pitch, but it is very nice and it makes sense for me because I wish we had something in Atlanta, and I probably should have went with the Amex in that case because they do have that lounge right there and I could use it every single day, but I don't. Anyways,
Mm,
I find it interesting with the passengers coming out of COVID. And the reason why I say it's the boomers is because it's the largest transfer of wealth that has ever occurred in the world at any time. And basically what happened was they had the most money invested at that point. So if you look at the S&P, you look at the Dow Jones index, all of those different types of things, and you see just a massive upward tilt to that coming out of COVID. And so their retirement accounts, their actual assets that were already invested in their houses, everything gained, multiples of what a usual investment should. And so you look at the younger generation and they had no assets invested at that point. And so obviously they never got to take advantage of those things. And if anything, they were worse off because everything with inflation, right, bailing everyone out became more expensive, but the incomes really never improved on the lower end of people. So you have a really weird influx in the aviation industry where you have a ton of people about to be retiring with a ton of cash, and they're going and deploying that cash on these magnificent vacations, first class around the world. Thus, international travel is it's the cash cow of United, right? It's where all the
mhm.
premium money is coming from. And they also have One World attached to that along with their credit card deal. Now, I think we've went through it before, but it's about $2 billion per quarter each one of those airlines gets off of credit card deals. You could make the opinion that these airlines are only profitable off of their credit card deals, which, yeah, technically, if you strip that away, they would be basically breaking even. But I still think these airlines will be profitable, maybe not to the same extent, obviously, but I do think they would find a way to be profitable. There's a lot of smart people involved in those airlines. But I find it interesting, right, where you see the CEO of Frontier, he is the number one proponent of airlines are a commodity business, period. Well, how does that play into a first class product? I don't know. If it's commodity, why are you putting in premiumization of your economy only airline? And the only thing I can say is he might be able to make some kind of point saying, oh, well, it's still a commodity. We're just doing it at a lower price, all that. No, you're trying to get a better RASM out of this and also grow your credit card sales. And so that's the biggest things I think with these other airlines that are trying to catch up to the profitability of Delta and United. It really comes down to how do we get more people to spend money on these cards? And the reason why everyone goes and buys a Delta card or United card is to get what's it called? To get first class access and to be able to get status on the airline so they can have that seat one day. And so I think that's where the market is going is there's so much money in those programs that Frontier is saying, okay, well, our credit card spend an average person on our airline is $6 per passenger comes from credit card revenue. And they've said this on the quarterly earnings report saying, okay, well, if we could get up to $12 uh, instead of 6, that's almost $500 million increase in revenue
That's
per year.
huge.
And so you look at their scaling business model, right? They're going to be going more and more places. They need to grow that credit card program in order to sustain profitability. And also, I think, like you said, more people are willing to pay for it. And I do think that coming out of COVID, these multi-billion-dollar businesses like Frontier or Southwest, it takes a long time for them to change their business model. It's not like overnight they're going to completely change their identity of who they are. It takes half a decade, maybe. And I think Southwest is a perfect example of that if you think about it. Frontier is going that direction. That's why when everyone says, oh, these companies are going to go out of business, no one can compete again. Well, look at how Delta and United and American, they were getting their ass whooped by these low cost carriers back in 2018 and 2017 in a profitability at the scale, right? And they went and reinvented themselves and look at what it's doing. So I think the low cost sector and everyone else is trying to catch up to what they did,
Mhm,
and basically come back to compete against them. And so I do think that it will get a little more competitive. But man, they've made some big strides in the last half decade. So it's going to be hard to get back there. But I think the profitability might come back. How long does this last for, though? That's what I wonder. Is this It's more than a fad because I don't think these low costs would invest if they didn't think it was a long-term structural change in the industry. So I'm really curious to see what you guys say on all of that.
Well, I guess my big comment on that is when you're looking at credit cards, based off of where you live, you got to look around and see what network carrier can provide what I want out of it. And do I want to go somewhere 3 days a week, 2 days a week? Do I want to have access to Hawaii, Europe, South America, Caribbean? If you're the type of person that likes to go to Cancun every year, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, some of the non network carriers would be great for that, right? If you have no interest in going to Europe, but if you're going to get a credit card, those network carriers offer you the chance to use those miles and those points and go anywhere you want on the planet, right?
Exactly.
Like if you have the Spirit credit card, for example, and I'm not trying to pick on Spirit, right? You can't get to Europe on Spirit, right? Yeah, okay, you might be able, the marginal cost for you after buying your ticket, your add-ons, and all of that to move to a big front seat might be a lot less than with a network carrier, right? The buy up on Delta is pricey, but Delta, they do such a great job, man. They've got those things priced. They know exactly how many people are going to buy those seats, right? At the end of the day, there are very few upgrades because people are actually buying those, right? But at Spirit, it's just it's a totally different business model. But if we're talking about credit cards, let's say if you live in a place like, I guess Nashville is a really good example. Okay, by far, the largest airline in Nashville is Southwest, right? I mean, 200 plus, 250 flights a day. I mean, or something like that. It's a huge operation if you've gone through there. Well, if you want to get to Europe, right? Who are you? You're going to have to maybe get a second credit card, right? You're going to maybe have to go get a Delta credit card or an American Airlines credit card, go fly through Charlotte, or get the American Airlines credit card, fly
or
British
just buy
Airways
a
now to
ticket.
Europe, or
Yeah.
just buy a ticket. But the thing is, the non-network carriers are losing passengers to the network carriers because they can't provide those kind of,
Accessibility.
yeah, the accessibility, right? Um, Southwest I think is kind of unique because they do have a really good domestic schedule and they have a really good near international US schedule and Hawaii schedule. But if you want to go outside of that, right, at least for now, you,
Hmm.
you kind of have to go fly to somebody else. Now they have announced some partnerships, which, it's kind of exciting, I suppose, if you're over there. But yeah, it's really interesting. You might have to have two credit cards to really take advantage of the networks. Then,
Can I say one thing too? So I find really interesting is if you look at Frontier's program they're rolling out, you just have to be a gold member to be able to get first class upgrades. So
mm,
that's nothing. So if you look at their program, it's kind of insane value because they want you to get the card so badly. You can bring a spouse with you for free, like anywhere. Once you have the status, you get a paid ticket for free, basically. Then you also get upgrades. I think it's only like $5,000 to spend. You become a gold member, like a year, which is like
Yeah, the CEO
nothing.
really highlighted that in the last earnings call, and, I mean, putting, like, a Delta first class experience next to a Frontier one is obviously not comparable, but I think he was accurate when
It's
he said
obtainable though.
you get the most benefit for our program
Value.
versus any yeah, most value. Thank you. Like the most value, the least amount of cost to you to get the highest.
Mm,
Whereas like I was at, I flew exclusively Delta when I flew contract. And dude, I spent tons of money on them, like ridiculous amounts of money, and I never got upgraded. I was a platinum medallion, didn't mean crap. Didn't mean anything, really. Like it was very disappointing. Like you work your butt off. You fly your butt off to get to that status, and then you're like, You don't get anything for it?"
mm.
Like, and then, it really was a bummer. Had I put that effort into flying on another carrier, I could have gotten a lot more value on that.
I think the credit card programs for Delta and United are very mature products at this point too,
That's
versus
true.
Frontier is not because, everyone says look at Delta and their Sky Pesos at this point, right? They're devalued so significantly in that sense. And so you look at someone like Frontier just really kind of getting into the credit card business. They've had it, but they really didn't care that much. And I think you're
Yeah.
going to see a big change in these airlines because in order for you to want the credit card, you have to increase your service level because in order to redeem, those benefits, you want to fly that airline. So I think you're going to see the customer service start to come up and I also think the cost, right? So if I can go and buy a ticket for I don't know, let's say $50 from Denver to San Francisco on Frontier and I can get a first class experience off of that, maybe or a better seat, right? Because I think in general, if you can fix your on time percentage and then also have a somewhat decent seat, a first class seat, I don't care about anything really else as a passenger. Just let me be able to sit somewhere nice and be on time. That's kind of the core
Yeah.
foundation of it, right? Everything else
Most
is kind of
people.
secondary. And so if you can fix those things, go ahead.
Well, and honestly, if you're talking a flight sub 90 minutes, the passenger experience on all these airlines is pretty much the same.
It's
I mean,
irrelevant.
the big difference might be Wi-Fi. And I'm talking about airlines with
There's
a
only one
large front
carrier that
seat.
doesn't have Wi-Fi though. I mean, everybody else has it. So
Yeah, yeah. It's well, Sun
Well,
Country.
that's
I
going
don't
to
think has
change
Wi-Fi,
too.
does
right?
Sun Country not have Wi-Fi?
I don't think they do
Oh,
they?
wow. Okay.
I don't.
I'll
I could be
take a
wrong.
look. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could be wrong. I don't want to spread misinformation here, right? We don't want to be fake news over here. So
But,
They
Frontier's adding
don't. No,
Wi-Fi
you're
at
right.
some
They don't.
point. I mean, if you look at what the comments from Barry are on LinkedIn, if you follow the airline news, he's saying, "Yeah, it's coming. We're just doing the final touches on the deal, basically." So, I mean, that's coming, and if you
Sun Country has yeah. Sorry. Sun Country has like the old they call it air flights. They're
mm,
on board so you could watch movies and stuff, but you can't connect to the internet. They at least have that going for them.
yeah.
so basically, what you're saying is this is are you saying that the low cost, ultra low cost airlines trying to transition to more premium,
Yeah, they're redeveloping the
it's more of a
business model.
value,
That's what's
it's
happening right
It
now.
like
has to.
like more of a value proposition? Is it kind of
Yeah.
Well,
what you're saying?
that's how they have to
Yeah,
market it to get the passengers to come to them versus because the passengers seem you're talking about like how times have changed. It seems like people now, especially the younger generation, they whether you want to call it entitlement or high expectations, they all want to fly in first class and take the selfies and get the internet and huh.
Scott, it's called the aspirational traveler. Thank you.
Is it?
Inspirational.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it is. It's the aspirational traveler.
Yeah.
Ed Bastian said, right? He wants people to get the lowest tier Delta credit card as soon as they're done with college, when they're in college, because those are future Delta One customers.
No.
It's
Wow.
aspirational that is
Interesting.
they are masters of branding. It's
Look at him
absolutely
branding.
amazing.
That
Because
was
it's a
pretty
cool
good.
thing.
Absolutely
All right,
amazing.
I stand corrected, Big Daddy Ed, aspirational travelers.
I mean,
But yeah,
it's
it's
true.
true.
It's
That's what they all
absolutely
want.
true.
Everybody wants that if I one of my favorite movies, Up in the Air with George Clooney. Everybody wants that, to be one of those exclusive card carriers that gets everything and has their own. You call and they know it's you, and oh, Mister So and So, what can I do for you? It makes you feel good. People want that. So even at the low cost levels, people want that. They expect that. And that's why the low cost carriers, I think, are really struggling and why they're all changing their business models. I mean, you've got Spirit kind of led the charge. They had the big front seats. Now Frontier is basically matching that model because the
Mm.
demand's there. They were using their blocked middle seats in the first few rows, and that was extremely profitable for them. And so they were like, all right, the demand's there. We're going to put the big front seats in, and they're going to have to do Wi-Fi because you cannot sell a business class ticket. I don't care what you say. You can't sell it without Wi-Fi.
It's
It's
coming.
not
That's what I'm
business
saying,
class. It
though.
has to come. And then Southwest is now doing assigned seating. Nobody ever thought that was going to happen. Like, but the demand must be so heavily there, even at Southwest. All those legacy passengers, they're not enough to outweigh all the newer passengers who demand the assigned seating.
And
Um,
it's beyond just assigned seating too at Southwest, right? Like they've, if you look at, there's some documents that I guess popped up online that there's a lounge that's going into apparently the
well, they
Honolulu
announced it
airport.
in Honolulu. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's not announced. It's just I guess
Sketch.
it's not a sketch, but something that was published through the city, like an approval for construction. I think. Now I don't know if that's a Southwest branded lounge. Southwest uses the Chase card, so maybe it's a partner. Maybe Southwest is financing it or something, but it's going to be a Chase lounge or a Chase branded
Yeah.
lounge. I think it is interesting because if you look around the Southwest system, right, Chase lounges are starting to pop up at Southwest gates, right? In
Phoenix.
Phoenix, they got a Chase Lounge in Phoenix. Las Vegas in the Sea Gates, which is all Southwest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Chase Lounge, I think, just opened up. I think LaGuardia, same thing. Yeah, LaGuardia, I think it's the same thing. Something I would say that's maybe a little bit more than just coincidence, maybe.
Oh, I think you're definitely right in that sense.
And whether or not it's going to be branded Southwest or not, or it's just a partnership with Chase, again, now you're starting to offer something that people really want. You can now offer like a really high end credit card that gives you access to all of that. It's great revenue. If now I think in 2026 with the partnerships of that Southwest is getting, right, Iceland Air and what else, China Airlines and EVA and um, Condor, I guess. I think it's a new one they just announced a partnership with. You now are going to be able to retain all those passengers that would, previously would have spilled to another carrier. You get the lounge, you can use your points to go to Europe. You get
It's like One
complimentary
World.
assigned. Yeah, you get complimentary assigned seat. Yeah, it's a little bit different than One World because of I believe the Southwest pilot contract really limits the what do they
Code
call them,
sharing.
PDUs? Well, yeah, code sharing, but even if an interline agreement would pop up, which is like what's happening now, it's the passengers per day each way. There's a pretty hard limit on that per the pilot contract before then they have to actually do the flying. So they might be a little bit limited there, but they need to at least get some partnerships, I think, started.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. Yeah, it's a whole evolution of the Southwest going from attempting to go from a low cost carrier to more of a network carrier. I don't know. Stay tuned, I guess. It seems like that airline is changing a lot.
I mean, it's just ever since Elliott came in, a lot of people are trying to blame it on Elliott, and Elliott might be the catalyst because of how they do business, but it seems to have been coming for a while now. They've been kind of slowly trending away from the old Herb model into this newer generation model, and it's just accelerating really fast. I mean, they're making a lot of changes. So, we'll see. I mean, obviously they would not be making them if they didn't think they were financially going to pay out. Period. So they're going to in one way or another. You're going to have your difficult period where all the legacy or, the old school passengers struggle with not just sitting wherever they want, and then they'll get over it. And I'm very curious to see how this changes the gate experience at Southwest. From lining up on those poles, how are they going to change their boarding process? It's going to be because that's going to be a chaos for a while. It's going to be very interesting to see.
I
There's
don't think
growing
it's going to be that big
pains,
of a
right?
deal. I
No,
really
well,
don't.
they have excellent customer service, especially amongst their gate agents, so that's going to help a lot.
But
Like,
people have flown on other airlines outside of Southwest. The people who buy a Southwest ticket, right? They've flown. I would be curious on the data, but I would assume that
that's a
everyone's
great
flown on
question.
Delta or United or and literally anyone else. And they're like,
Maybe.
"Oh, yeah, I know how to," they call me, "This is my seat," or whatever, "I need to wait," whatever. I think it's gonna be fine. I think that this business, everyone wants to come back and take it to her, but in the end of the day, he was all about innovation within the company and not being flat-footed. So they're finally innovating towards being a more profitable airline and doing change. And even if it doesn't work, I'll be completely honest, I'm glad they're doing it because the business was stale. And just like Frontier, the business was stale. No one wanted this anymore. There was no money in it. So let's go ahead and change it around. So I think that everyone is just finally getting the business plan in place to be able to execute on finally taking on the head carriers. So I think a lot is going to be up in the air for the next couple of years and see how that plays out. But the interesting thing is I think each one of them are kind of staying in their lane too. Like if you look at Southwest, they're really going into each one of those areas, like Jose was saying, Phoenix and all those different areas. They're adding maybe some lounges coming up, but then also they're not announcing necessarily a first class product because they probably listen to their passengers saying, "We don't really care about the big seat. We care about more legroom. We care about all these other things." And so that's the way they took it with their business model. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some other things come up and they're probably instead of going full network carrier, this is a kind of a nice in between. Because again, I just don't think you can really take a business and completely flip it on its heels in a matter of 2 years and expect everything to work out. I think they have to be strategic with those decisions, which they're doing. And same with Frontier is like you can't transition away from being a low cost, low fares done right immediately. It takes some time to get away. And I
Mhm.
still think that Frontier is going to stay in their lane, being like, hey, we're going to go after the person who is looking for value and who goes from Detroit to Fort Lauderdale, you know, 3 times a year. And we want them to have a premium experience or whatever. And I think there's enough people out there for each one of these businesses to win. I really do. They just have to change their business model and scrape a couple percentile more out of each passenger, which I think they're doing. So that's the way I see it. But one question I have for you guys is what is going to make everything crash and burn? Like everything is premium right now, right?
Hmm.
Lots of money, all of that. It's awesome. Everyone's making money. But like what's going to change if something, what's going to cause it to all crash and burn in that sense? Like an
Yeah,
'08
that's
recession or what is it going to take for that to go back to being a commodity in that sense?
honestly, I think it'd be a white collar recession, 100%, 100%. I think if there's a recession in tech, if you guys have been watching kind of what's going on in the AI space,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and some of the investment, I guess, in quotes, um, that's taken place, which just
Mhm.
these like 8 companies are just promising, billions of dollars of investments into every other one of those 8 companies.
Mhm.
Is it a house of cards? I don't know. I am not a financial analyst by any means. Um, but if that were to, if those stocks, which are propping up the S&P, right? Like it's like what 40% of the value of the S&P or something like that, like 10 or 8 to 10 stocks. Those are to drop by 30, 40%, are the are is the aspirational traveler, upper middle class traveler who's lost 30% of their 401k, are they going to now buy up? I don't I don't know. Um but yeah, I think a white collar recession would change things quite a bit. Um at
Yeah.
least at the network carriers, right? A premium travel experience. I don't know. I just think it's interesting to think about.
It is interesting because everyone keeps talking like these airlines are indestructible. That oh my god, they're making so much money. This is the only end all be all. And we all know in aviation, there's nothing but change. It's the only thing that stays constant is change in this industry. And so it's been a great half decade going into it, but like what is to come? I don't know. And yeah, I don't think anyone does. And I think that the story's not complete yet. And I think we have a long ways to go to kind of figure out, and I guess it never ends, right? But I don't think the story of the competitors and the consolidation is done yet. And I don't know, should we tie that into kind of our next topic of what's
Sure.
going on with Spirit? Okay. You want me to go through it?
Yeah, go ahead. You have all the deets.
Okay. So I'm just going to go through. Today is the 9th of December. and there was an 8K put out by Spirit today, and I'll just kind of go through what that went through. And it basically was the monthly operating report, which they're basically required to submit to the court every month of while in bankruptcy. And if you look at it from right here in October, their operating revenue was 270.5 million. Their operating expenses were 366.8 million. So an operating loss of 96.3 million. So that is not changed compared to what it has been in the last couple months. So kind of concerning. There was something though that I wanted to point out. I believe it was from technically it shows on paper that they had an operating profit of $20 million, I believe, but that takes into account the air cap deal. So yeah, if you count the air cap
Mm,
deal from the money that they were sent from that, they were technically profitable at $20 million, but that's not really the full equation. So don't think it's getting any better in that sense. So I asked some computer models basically to model out based upon the data I already have been going through with it of the different cuts that are occurring. So we have the pilots and flight attendants and all that kind of stuff of what they're trying to get to of $100 million per year in cost cutting. And then also they're looking to drop about 11 more airplanes. I don't know if you guys saw that. So they're looking down to cut 11 more A320 family jets. And so their CFO basically said that these airplanes are nothing but draining cash from the business. So if we look at that, that's probably 300 to $400,000 in this is what it's averaging in probably lease payments on those. So basically, if you look at that, 11 airframes, sorry, each one of those is 300 to 400,000 per month to lease. So probably 3.5 to $4 million in savings as well if they cut those. So we look and end it out. Basically, long story short, if we model conservatively with a 75 to $95 million band of their burn rate going into next year, even with all these different kind of changes that are occurring, they basically have 3.2 to 4.4 months after the date of recording to figure their out until they reach the bottom of their liquidity. So I use $200 million as a liquidity kind of baseline of what they need to maintain in order for credit card holdbacks to not get worse and enforce harder. Because again, airlines can't just drop to zero in terms of liquidity. That's not how the FAA wants them to rerun or the different people that they owe money to in that sense. So one thing that is important though is that December 13th date coming up, if they do actually draw upon the $100 million of DIP financing. So that will be really interesting to see. Going through some more research on that, we might not technically see what exactly caused them to draw it. They might just say, hey guys, we fulfilled the requirement and we drew the $100 million for DIP financing. They don't need to exactly explain to us do they have an IOI, an indication of interest from another airline, or do we come up with the baseline credit term or the baseline terms of a plan of reorganization with the creditor committee? They don't need to tell us until later on. So we won't know until, and they have 4 days from the date of the 13th, basically. If they did draw upon it, maybe they also scheduled a different time. But if they did draw upon it at any point, they have basically 4 days to signal out to the public saying there was a material effect on the business, basically, which causes them to have to report it through the SEC. So that is kind of the next thing going up. But if they did get that $100 million, it basically only extends them a month to 4.2 to 5.8 million, 5.8 months. I don't think this factors
mm.
in the 100 million that goes towards the acquisition sale afterwards or the actual execution of the plan. So that's another 100 million. So basically, if we model out what they're burning now of 97 million, 75 to 97 million, it's either a month to maybe a month and a half, best case, of an additional workflow. So it could probably take them, I don't know, maybe 6.5 months from December into June, the best case scenario in that sense. But that's kind of the update I wanted to share with everyone that the money has not gotten any better in that sense in October at least, whereas $97.5 million operating loss. So we'll see.
I mean, it definitely doesn't sound good. I'll say that. Yeah, I think all signs definitely point to a merger or acquisition at some point. Probably an acquisition, right? I think you guys have talked about that quite a bit on this show here, but Frontier Spirit seems like a match made in heaven, right? It's been that way for 4 years, right? Isn't that it was about 4 years
Never
ago,
ending.
2022? Yeah, it seems like they keep doing the dance. Is it going to be a merger, or does Bill Frankie want to run in there and right pick up the pieces for at a fire sale? Right? I don't know. I don't know.
How do you see that
Yeah,
changing the
yeah.
industry though, Jose? If that were to occur, we talk about it a lot, but I'm curious from a third party standpoint, how do you think that plays into kind of that premiumization of bringing that credit cards to scale in that sense with how these airlines are changing?
Well, I think it gives Frontier, a nice easy foothold, right? Because Spirit has the airplanes with the premium product already. They've got Wi-Fi. They've got stations set up all in the Caribbean and in South America. Um, it's a I don't want to say a turnkey premium-ish product, but it seems like it would be fairly close to one, right?
Yeah.
And they get a nice foothold in some cities that either complement, right? We're talking Vegas, Atlanta to some extent, right? Because there's a small base in Atlanta, or there used to be with Spirit. I'm not sure if they still have one. And Orlando, right? If you add those together, you have a pretty sizable operation. And I think, it definitely would be more of a competitor to a Southwest, JetBlue, um, for sure. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I see it from a point of view of credit card acquisitions, of saying how many more people we get within the credit card game and be able to increase the basically your scale in the country, meaning that our network is larger now for you to go more places and you'll have more frequency in those things. I think all of those things are kind of check marks of the reason why people want to sign up. Like if I think of like a ultra low cost carrier, I think they're going to be more of a low cost carrier coming up in the next 5 years. If I look at that kind of mindset from that passenger, I think I want more places to go, and I also want something at lower cost, like legitimately lower cost. And I think that having those together is going to increase credit card acquisition significantly. And I think that if you go back and listen to their initial 2022 M&A call that they did with all the different people from Deutsche Bank and all those things, they said that credit card acquisition and basically scale was the big one of the biggest reasons why it made sense was to be able to increase those things. So I think they've wanted to do this for a long time. They're finally just being able to deploy it. So I don't know. We'll see. Again, we'll see in the next couple of days if anything comes out. I don't think it's necessarily done. If not, but maybe 2026 we kind of see the end of the saga, as we always say. But Scott, do you want to tell the listeners about kind of what happened in Chicago O'Hare with Spirit selling the gates?
Yeah, Americans entered the arena, kind of throwing a wrench into the whole thing. So there was how did it go down? American bought a bunch of gate or a couple gates in O'Hare from Spirit. It was a $30 million deal, it looks like. But in order to do so, well, or I don't know if it was in order to do so or just in conjunction with, they filed some kind of interest in the bankruptcy proceedings, which shows that, there is outside interest in this. And if they do a 363 sale, it is just, auctioning everything to the highest bidder. So Spirit has assets that not just Frontier, but even some of the legacies, are clearly eyeballing and can profit off of. So I definitely don't think we'll see a merger at this point. It would be irresponsible for a business to do that. But acquisition wise, if they enter any kind of sale like that, it's a highest bidder situation unless somebody comes in and agrees to just buy them out completely, which I don't think anybody would because they have so much debt. So it'd be interesting to see. But anyways, yeah, Americans expressing interest now, at least in the gates, which throws it into like this whole other battle with United on gates at O'Hare. It's similar to like how Delta has the monopoly in Atlanta, and all the other carriers have had to sue Delta and take the city to court for unfair gate.
Allocation.
Delta basically, yeah, everybody just Delta just pushing everybody out because they forced the city one way or another to give them all the gates. O'Hare, we're seeing kind of the similar thing with United and American now. Um, and so them buying gate, that was kind of a backdoor way for American to get a couple big gates from Spirit to go against, United, which is pretty interesting. It shows the whole complexity of the system and how everything's intertwined. And yeah, so that's a kind of a new update that just happened. Throws a new competitor into the ring, and who knows where that's going to go.
Yeah. Jose, could you tell the listeners, I know we kind of talked off air just a second. It seemed like you had a decent grasp of it. And again, take all this with a grain of salt. We're not the experts, but we do have a really good podcast that I would like to share about exactly how the gate allocation works in Chicago O'Hare, which is really kind of convoluted in a way. And it's basically allowing United to increase the amount of flights operating in the market share within Chicago O'Hare significantly, leaving their biggest competitor, American, in the dust. Thus, American wanting these two gates to stay competitively in the mix in O'Hare and make sure that they can at least have some kind of gain in that sense while United's growing significantly. But you kind of said the gate allocation and you said, the look back. Could you kind of explain to the listeners how that kind of occurs from how you understand it? And then we'll also link that video or that podcast below that goes through in depth exactly what occurred.
Yeah, so from what I understand in at O'Hare, the city looks at gate utilization and the amount of flights an airline has, and they look at it for a calendar year. And then after the calendar year, they'll go, well, your utilization was up or down, blah, blah, blah. And it's like halfway through the year that they do that, right? American was underutilizing some of their gates. And so they end, through in 2024, well, coming to the end of 2025, the O'Hare went, well, your gates are underutilized. So you're going to lose, I think it was like 6 gates or something like that. I think that sounds about right. Um, and then so the next year, looking forward, you're going to then be operating with fewer gates, right? Allowing United to operate more flights, right? And then their utilization goes up, right? And it's hard to then once that process starts, it's hard to get continue to keep getting gates. So with American getting a couple of gates from Spirit, it's going to change the numbers, on that next look back. And part of the problem too is that post 2024, American had actually increased their amount of flights, right? But that couldn't be taken into account when they were looking at that gate utilization look back to the
Hmm.
prior year. And it's really unfortunate. And, American's operation, Robert Isom has publicly stated, yeah, they want to be competitive. They've increased flights. And from what I understand, they have a higher on time performance out of O'Hare than United does right now. And they're doing everything they can to maintain or grow market share. The sleeping giant may have woken up, because if
Yeah.
American wanted to, man, they could really whoop some butt in the industry. Anyway, that's what I understand is going
No, it's
on. So
perfect.
it's a really great idea for them to get some gates from Spirit, which I'm sure they were happy to divest. Right? I can't imagine flying at O'Hare was increasing for Spirit. Right?
No. And so that leaves Spirit with 2 gates, and so I do genuinely wonder how long they're gonna keep that base open for with 2 gates in the entire, airport in that sense. That's not much, and that really limits your frequency availability, and if you look at a crew base, I mean, 2 gates in the industry is nothing, you know, really. And so, I think one thing I find interesting is why didn't United try to come in and outbid them? Because if I'm United, right, why not try to really um, have superiority over American and try to say, hey, we'll just go for 40 million. At the end of the day, $40 million for United Airlines is not much. It's not. It's a lot of money, but like, why couldn't they do that? Why couldn't they buy the gates in that sense? I wonder. And then another thing too is, you know, Scott Kirby has basically said vocally, saying, "Yeah, it's not even a competition anymore. We are the biggest hubbed airline in Chicago, and we're Chicago's airline now." And so that really pissed off Robert Isom in that sense because
Yeah.
you know how Scott talks. Everyone knows how Scott talks, and he's kind of openly said the war is done. We won that war, and I think that again. I think things will play out, and we'll see how everything goes. But it was definitely a reactionary thing, in my opinion. I think they needed to do this in order to compete. But what I will say is I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with them being interested in any other part of Spirit Airlines in that sense, other than they needed this as a tactile response to United continuing to grow and the gate look back situation going on in O'Hare. So that's the way I read it. I don't know if you guys see it any differently, but I know there's some articles saying, "Oh, well, are they going to merge? Are they going to, acquire?" And I'm just like, I don't think that's really correlated to what just occurred.
I mean, I definitely could see, in the event of a
Asset sale.
fire asset sale, I could see American picking up some of
Well, sure.
Spirit's
Yeah.
gate spaces and aircraft too. There's a little bit of commonality, I think, with some of the CEOs that they've got. So I could definitely see that, especially at DFW, right?
Yeah.
The Spirit gates are right next to a bunch of American regional jet gates. I mean,
Hmm.
that could make sense. And if they wanted to take some of the gate space maybe at Fort Lauderdale, I don't know. I mean, maybe
Sure.
maybe that would make sense, right? A larger foothold in the Miami-Dade area,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
or in an airport like Atlanta. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree. Interesting. Interesting stuff
Yeah.
as
It
always,
seems
guys.
like when they finally part Spirit out. I mean, I just think that's the direction it's going to go. Not to not to bash on anybody there, but that's just the logical conclusion, right? No one's going to come in and just buy them, and based off,
They
I mean,
it
based
doesn't
on the
seem
numbers,
it
though,
doesn't I know, but it does not seem like they are just giving up. They continue every single time.
well, they're not. They're going down fighting, but I think if they end up getting piecemealed out in, a sale or liquidation, then it's not gonna go to one company. The people are gonna take the gate space and routes that are gonna expand their footprint based off their current network. No one's just gonna come in and take Spirit's network. It's just gonna get whoever it matches up best with will take what they want from it. That just seems to be the most logical conclusion. I mean,
I hear you. I
yeah.
disagree though. I don't think they're trying to piecemeal it out. They continually keep making these moves.
I'm
I
not saying they're trying to. I
You
don't,
just think it's gonna
like,
happen that way?
I just think that's what's gonna happen because, again, like, you look at the numbers. We were talking about this a couple episodes ago, like, all the numbers you said it yourself, like, that's the ideal fairy tale conclusion is these numbers that they've pitched in the bankruptcy.
Yeah, which are not realistic, obviously.
It's not realistic, at least not with the way we're seeing things go. So that's why I'm saying that
Yeah.
I don't see any other conclusion, right? I'm not saying they're giving up because they're definitely not. Especially on paper, they're trying to make it look like they're going to make it work. And I mean, I hope they prove me wrong and it's the outcome I don't expect and it happens and that'll be great for everybody that works there. And if they turn the company around, that'd be incredible. I just don't see it happening. I mean, tell me otherwise. Convince me otherwise, please.
I think a piecemeal honestly makes more sense. I think the majority could go to Frontier, but in a place like Las Vegas, do we really think Frontier needs, what, 15 gates or whatever Spirit has in Las Vegas? I mean, I don't, I just don't, I
They have
just
so
don't.
many already over there.
Yeah, I just don't see it. Likewise, Detroit might be but they might want everything in Detroit, right, or something like that. But I don't. I'm not sure if Frontier would want everything. I think
I'm
they
not
could
saying that
piecemeal some
either.
of that stuff out.
Yeah, I'm not saying that either. Well, all I'm saying is they're trying their best to continually maintain their liquidity, and if they were ready to do a fire sale, they would have done it by now. I don't think
Yeah.
the dip funding would have
Mm,
came through. Like the
yeah, it's
creditor
true.
board
It's true.
continues to fund them knowing that there is an outcome to end this. I cannot see it another
This
way
is
where
this is what's so confusing. You know,
Mm.
it's just
they're they're like we're adamantly going alone, and everybody on the outside's
it's like
going,
what the fuck?
how?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, we're just looking at the bigger picture and the history of it. perhaps the creditors have some inside information that's not we're not privy to that gives them a different opinion,
I think just like
Well,
how they
yeah.
had a
you know?
plan of going into bankruptcy after the first one, like, obviously, everyone knew that nothing material had changed after the first bankruptcy.
Well, and that's why they're getting sued,
Yeah,
big time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I saw that that's what you sent. I
Mhm.
think that they've known a plan all along in that sense, and so they're just executing on the plan, and we're not privy to it until it's time to know. And so, yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people at work keep asking what's going on here, and everyone has their own grandiose ideas. But if you look at the actual people that are funding it, do you think these guys are morons putting $500 million? And yeah, you're moving up in the creditor secured creditor line, but like, I don't know. It's just big decisions, and I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens again on December 13th around that time point, and if maybe something shifted where they'll get the money later on and they come to different terms. I don't know. Things happen like that, but I think the story again is not done, and so we'll see. It's all coming up in the next week, basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's. I know we talk about it a lot, but I think this is the biggest thing I want to say going into this episode. Yeah, we talk about this a lot, but if you really think about taking away Spirit as a general airline, it's going to make probably the biggest transformational um, event in the airlines in the
Impact.
last 5 years, at least. Alaska and Hawaiian, I don't see that being insanely big. But when you take out all that low cost capacity in the domestic market, I think that's a significant shift in terms of what every airline can do. And so it's a really big deal in that sense, not only for pilots, for where you want to get hired and having all these guys leaving. I know with your episode with Connor, 127 people left. They canceled the furlough for Q1. That's a big deal, right? They're not gonna
Oh, yeah, that happened
furlough.
after we recorded that episode, yeah.
Yeah,
They
so I
canceled all
mean,
their Q1 furloughs, and they furloughed several hundred less flight attendants than they had planned, I believe.
yeah, I mean, so there's
So,
just news coming
there's
every
enough
week from this
attrition.
shit. I
Yeah.
mean, and so everything has a material effect on our careers in that sense. We might not be understanding of it, but it does affect how the airlines we work at respond and profitability and all those different types of things. So I'm off my
Yeah.
soapbox.
I mean, I agree with you that it would be the largest change in the industry in in a few year look back. But at the end of the day, Spirit's expected to shrink to a little over 100 airplanes flying a lot of point to point.
The
So
shift is
will it
already
be
going to
that?
occur. Yeah,
I mean, will if you take 100 planes out of U.S. capacity from a ultra low cost carrier in a space that arguably is fairly saturated, that I mean, to be honest, it can probably be backfilled fairly quickly by I don't know, an Avello with their 50 E195 E2s coming in, or 190 E2s, or
that's
whatever
a
they
great
are.
point.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Or
it's a different model.
Breeze. I mean, those two airlines continue to grow. And if you look at those two, that backfills all the Spirit capacity with arguably a better product flying places that people want to go, which is that thin, long point to point.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I think it remains to be seen if it's going to be that big of a disrupting factor in the industry. I think the bigger story is United and Delta and their growth gobbling up market share, and what will happen to the rest of the industry. You know, Scott Kirby has said that going forward, it's going to be the two network carriers, and then everybody else is going to get spillover, right? Spillover traffic, aside from a few metro areas in the US. That's a pretty big thing to say,
Hmm.
but
it's huge.
I think the growth of those two airlines going forward is going to have much more of an effect on the industry than the loss of 100 airplanes from an ultra low cost carrier, which isn't filling seats, right? So anyway, I'm just looking at it just a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah. That's a good a different perspective than we've talked about.
I also think too, something to point out is you're right, the 100 airplanes, but it's kind of measured in ASMs in that sense with a higher seat load and configuration
Absolutely.
and the markets that they're deploying them on, right? So like they're not deploying them from Omaha, Nebraska to Denver, right? They're not those kind of routes. They're doing them saturated routes of JFK to Chicago O'Hare. Now you take
Mhm.
out, how many hundreds of thousands per year on that route of low cost seats, the math changes slightly, but I do agree with you that in the end of the day, materially, I don't think it's significant enough. But if you look at someone to grow into that space and regain profitability because you have no one else to compete against, I do think that changes the ultra low cost kind of realm or that kind of range in that sense. And I think it lifts all the airlines outside of United and Delta and even helps them as well. So, which is what the industry needs. I don't want an industry with United and Delta and that's it, and everyone else is their bitch. I don't want that. I do, but that's what it's turning into. That's what Scott
Yeah.
wants. He wants two airlines and the rest is just the minnows, and we
Mhm.
control, everything else in the industry. I don't want that industry. There's not capitalism in that industry in that sense because you become two duopolies. And I mean, look at what's happening with Netflix and Paramount right now, along with Warner
Mhm.
Bros. That's like Delta and United merging together. That's basically what that is. And
Mhm.
so that's what I thought of. I was like, man, if that goes through, I mean, anything is possible because there's like four media conglomerations on all of Hollywood. Everything else is siphoned off of those. And
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
want to,
and that's a ton of IP, all right? That
yeah,
is so much IP located in
yeah.
one place. Yeah. Um,
So we'll
and it's
see.
kinda like the nail in the coffin for studios, movie production too
Oh
in the
yeah.
US.
They're a dying breed.
That's another
Yeah.
podcast, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
I
exactly.
moonlight on entertainment podcasts.
Well, I mean, coming off of what you just said, John, like I'm starting to wonder really if in the domestic realm in the US if there really is a place for ULCC
I think there
cuz
will
it's
be. Yeah.
you think so? Cuz I mean it's a European model. I think with the way they're shifting, it's going to be more of an LCC platform. You know, they might claim they're ULCC, but the reality is it's going to be LCC stuff. Because if Spirit goes away, there's no competition to drive down ticket prices anymore. And so Frontier, if they're the only ULCC left, they can raise their prices without having to compete with Spirit, increase their profit margins dramatically, and they don't have to fight anybody because the legacies very rarely are going to try to undercut Frontier or any of the ULCCs.
They'll make their money
You
a
know,
different way. And I don't even,
exactly.
they don't need to lower the price that much.
Right.
And so they're going after a different passenger in that sense. So I think that if you look at Southwest moving more upstream, and then you're really left with a significant amount of the market that can't afford. I mean, I just looked yesterday. I did a flight from Chicago to Baltimore. The airline I fly for was charging $170, right, for the one way, which is a significant. It was actually a pretty good yield off of that. United and Delta were charging $700. I mean, so obviously those things can change. Dude, you asked 3, a family of 3, that's $2,100 for to go from Baltimore to Chicago.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of money in the middle upper class, but man, there's a lot of people not in that upper middle class as well that I
Hmm.
think there's a real value maximization that you can create through having scale and being with all, and that's what Frontier's trying to do. And I think it's a decent game plan. So I don't know, man. I just fly the airplane. So those are my thoughts on everything. And yeah, I think Jose brings up really valid points though. And I'm not discrediting those because I think those are all correct.
And just remember too, it's like, yeah, we won't have ultra low cost carriers anymore. Those network carriers, including Southwest, are already competing for that space with basic
Yeah.
economy,
Hmm.
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
There's
Yes.
already competition there. Someone's already flying between Chicago and, you know, if you're talking about families going places, they're not buying last minute tickets. They're looking far out. And if you're looking far out, there's going to be a basic economy ticket available, and you can go buy it on United. You can use their credit card and get some points or status. Maybe, man, I think it varies with different airlines, but um, it's just so hard to compete because those network carriers offer everything, right? They are Walmart, they are Target, they are Pottery Barn, they are Louis Vuitton, all in right, all in
Yeah.
one airline,
Yes.
right? Choose your own adventure, right? They've got, I mean, what, Delta has 12 different airfares for one given flight,
And they're making
right?
more. They're making more of
Yeah.
them.
I mean, you go select a premium economy ticket on Delta, and you got like 3 fares to choose from. That's unbelievable. It's awesome. I mean,
They're
good for them.
unbundling it. as well right now. So they're trying to
Yeah.
do it where you can do a premium economy seat, but not get anything else. So that's what they're trying to do new is saying, hey, like, we're not going to give you the snack box or alcoholic drink, but we'll give you the seat if you want to pay a little bit more. So, like, those things are really interesting to see how they're doing that, the product segmentation.
Yeah. I think there's room for competition in the US. It's a huge market. It's the only way you can get reasonably from point A to point B in this country is to fly. Right. We don't, I mean, Amtrak is an absolute joke. And, maybe Brightline West is going to take a bite out of the LA to, I think it will. LA to Las Vegas market that's going to be a really interesting one to watch for sure. But things change, right? The market is cyclical, right? Who's on top
Yes.
now is going to change. Everyone reacts to market forces. I think it's easier to find new ways to get revenue than it is to cut your costs to start to be profitable again, right?
Yeah.
And so if there is a recession at some point, which there will be, right? It's the business cycle. There's going to be a recession at some point, right? I almost wonder if those middle of the road carriers, especially Alaska, who has great cost control,
Yeah.
I think, and even to some extent Southwest that has lower costs, I wonder if they're going to be able to thrive. And I think they will through whatever the next recession is. The question is, when is that going to happen, right?
Well, that
Nobody
happened
knows.
during 9/11, right? That's how they exploded with their scale. Was everyone else had to basically cut their capacity, and Southwest basically went in all these different markets and stole the capacity because they hedged the fuel, right? Something like that. In 2000, I don't know if it was '08 or in 9/11 during that time period, but they really played it smart in that sense where these legacies they're really good in good times, but their cost is literally triple, if not quadruple, coming up on everyone else. So yeah, it's great when the money's flowing, man, but right when there's a cutback, it's an immediate thing, and so it's yet to be seen under the new airline, industry of how they're making money with the credit cards in that sense, if they can hedge away from that. And Scott Kirby says they're not going to have issues in that sense, and we're basically hoping there's. I don't know if he said we are hoping for a recession, but we are going to actively grow in a recession. That's kind of what he told his employees last year, I believe.
What are you going to do though with one of those premium heavy 787s
You
that they
tell me,
have, or
man.
the 76s? I just don't know who's going to be filling that. It's either going to be, I mean, are you gonna be able to fill it with paying passengers? I'm not super convinced that that's going to happen. And if you're upgrading people to that, well, that's almost like a double whammy as far as profitability or RASM goes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really bad because you have the infrastructure set up for premium and elite travelers, but they're not paying for it, and that is really rough too. Those premium heavy 7.6s are like half the airplane at lie flat seating, right? Interesting. Anyway, hmm.
And I'm sure
There's
that
enough there's enough paying passengers on those international routes. A lot of business travel, especially between Asia, and the West Coast.
Right now there is,
Yeah.
right? But in a recession, how do you fill that cabin? I
a
don't
global
know.
recession. I don't
Well,
know.
now you get, yeah, global recession versus domestic.
Who knows?
They'll cut down the flights. That's what they always do.
Thus giving capacity opportunities to everyone
Mhm.
else. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
but if there's a recession, no one's gonna be making money, so why are they gonna take over those routes?
Hey man, maybe Barry was right on his cost is king, and maybe he can grow out of a recession with the lowest chasm and be able to operate flights for in that sense. I think that's the
He
whole
can get
point,
his
though,
he can
right?
get his six cents chasm, right?
So you know what I
Six
mean,
cents,
though.
man.
That's the whole point of what they're trying to do in that business model is be able to say we're ironclad through a recession, but that is even yet to be seen there. They've never really been through a recession. I think I remember Jose and I were
Yeah.
talking about that a couple years ago, being like, that's what they've said at the time, but since they got bought by, or since they bought, who did they buy? I forget. Back in Midwest,
Midwest.
yeah,
Yeah, it
since
was
they bought
2013 or
Midwest
something.
And it wasn't they
and
didn't buy it, it
Republic,
was Republic. Republic just
Republic owned them, right? Yeah.
smashed the two airlines together and then
Yeah.
that was really unfortunate. It
Yeah.
was really nasty, but yeah.
But even since then, right, there hasn't been a global economic catastrophe outside of COVID, I guess, but that was 2 years. I mean, that snapped back almost immediately.
Mhm.
So that business model is yet to be tested in a legitimate, just economical. So we'll see in that sense.
Well, that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Well, Jose, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate having you. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy that you found the bottom of the barrel as far as guests go. So it's only up from here.
That's you got to start somewhere, right? Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. We appreciate you. You could find us on all the socials: X, TikTok, Instagram. We got our website, autopiloton.com. You can email us. And we're getting back on track here. We're getting 3 to 4 episodes a month out again, so which is great. And look forward to having another episode soon. Thanks again.
See you.